Is by this thing. Let's see. The time has come to tell the story of the greatest storyteller of all the times, that is of Valmiki, the Adi Kavi. Adi Kavi is the oldest Kavi. You may know what Adi Kavi means, the foremost poet or the fountainhead of poetry. Right. Valmiki composed the Ramayana in 24,000 stanzas, and most of it, in one form or the another, is known to every man, woman, and child in our country. Ram, the hero of the epic Ramayana, was Valmiki's creation. Although the word create is not quite apt if one considers the process by which Ramayana came into existence. Ram was not a character created by the storyteller and presented in a work. The work in the first place was not written. It arose within the writer. मतलब इंस्पिरेशनल कहानी थी जो वर्क थी ना वाल्मीकि की रामायण वो इंस्पिरेशन थी. The character was not conceived but revealed himself in a vision. The time theme of the epic is somewhat puzzling to us who are habituated to a mere horizontal sequence of events. Valmiki composed as if he had a past tale to tell, and yet it was broadcast to the world by Kush and Love, Kush and Love, the son of Ram, who heard it directly from the author. है ना? मतलब उन्होंने this thing. One has to set aside all one's habitual notions of movement and get used to a narrative going backwards and forwards and sideways. When we take into consideration the fact that a king ruled for 60,000 or more years, enjoying an appropriate longevity, it seems quite feasible that the character whose past or middle period has been written about continues to live and turns up to have a word with the historian. Different. This happened to Valmiki. Once Rama asked Valmiki during a meeting of the immortals in another world, "How did you learn all about me even before I was born?" Unsettling again all one's time senses. One had all along thought of as a retrospective on the part of the poet seems actually to have been a prophecy as well as a piece of contemporary chronicle. However, an average story listener accepts these situations without a second thought, never questioning when or how or before or after. To an ordinary Indian storyteller listener, it seems perfectly natural that events could spread over before and after and just now. Rama was a reincarnation of Vishnu, but in human form he became oblivious to his godliness and was subjected to all the torments and mystifications of the human mind. And so he had a genuine wonder at a biographer who could write his full life ahead of his time and also attempt to solve his personal problems in the concluding stages of the story. Valmiki answered Ram by narrating his own life. Once there was a scholar named Sankha, who, having completed his studies at a far-off place, was returning home along the banks of Godavari. मैं संख का था वो था स्कॉलर तो वो अपनी गोदावरी से करा था. In deep thought, when he was startled out of his wit by a shout at his ear, a highwayman suddenly blocked his path, flourishing some dreadful weapons of his trade. Sankha babbled, "Who are you?" "My father's son," replied the robber with a ghastly leer. तुम कौन हो? मैंने अपने बाप का बेटा हूँ. What do you want? Everything you have except your life if you'd like to keep it. तुम्हारा सब कुछ besides तुम्हारी जिंदगी अगर तुम्हें रखनी है तो. The Brahmin said, "I'm a poor scholar but not a man of wealth." तो संत ने कहा भाई मैं तो स्कॉलर हूँ मेरे पास पैसा तो नहीं है. Otherwise why should I be walking back to my city? तो मैं पैदल क्यों चल रहा था? I would be riding a chariot. As if I could not overtake a chariot, said the robber aggressively. Let me see what is detachable about you apart from hair and nails. तुम्हारे नाखून और बाल के अलावा क्या क्या चीज़ें निकाली जा सकती हैं? उस चोर ने पूछा. He laughed in a ghastly manner. The detachable articles on the scholar's person were a gold-like ring on his little finger, picked up at a fair, and copper talisman attached to his sacred thread. उसके sacred thread पे copper talisman था और एक gold-like ring थी. "Oh Brahman, keep your sacred thread and give me that talisman." मुझे sacred thread जो है रखो और ये talisman जो है मेरे को दे दो. Sank was very reluctant to give away the talisman. "Oh," he wailed, "a wonderful sadhu gave this to me 2 years ago to protect me from disease and devils." तो ये talisman जो है मुझे एक साधु ने दिया था ताकि मैं इनसे जो हूँ बच सकूं डिजीज वगैरह से. I'm not a devil or a disease, and so it won't protect you from me. ना तो मैं शैतान हूँ ना कोई disease हूँ, तो मुझसे तो protect नहीं करेगा. Give it here, no argument. And the thief cried arbitrarily. The Brahmin handed it over. Brahmin ने hand over किया. What is a cash piling? How cunningly fellows like you tuck away your treasure. तो पैसा कितना है? तुम लोग अपना पैसा कैसे छुपाते हो? The robber said, running his fingers along the folds of the way at the waist of the Brahmin's dhoti. ब्राह्मण की धोती पकड़ी. उसने कहा कि भैया देखेंगे तुम्हारे पास कितना पैसा है. He found a couple of coins and appropriated them with a sneer. उसको 2-3 कुछ पैसे मिले, उसने ले लिया. Then he snatched away a piece of cloth covering the upper portion of Sankha's body, leaving him in his dhoti. Take off those sandals, he commanded finally, looking at his feet. You do not deserve such luxury. तुम sandals पी लो. तुम्हें ऐसी luxuries की जरूरत नहीं है. A fellow treasuring just 2 brass coins. The Brahmin slipped off the leather sandals, which were thick with layers of patch and which had protected him from the hot sands of the river. Having stripped the Brahmin of all his possessions, the rabbi said, now you go your way. Grateful to be spared of his life, the Brahmin trotted off on the sands, anxious to be gone out of the range of the highwayman. The sands of Godavari were hot, and the Brahmin felt as if he had been asked to walk on the frying pan. तो गोदावरी की नदी के किनारे जा रहे थे, देखा एकदम कस के गर्मी. He kept leaping up and forward, unable to keep his feet down. His progress was negligible, and his tormentor watched him at first with amusement as he kept hopping away. Presently, the Haman, casting all the propriety to the winds, took off his loincloth, tossed it ahead, and hopped onto it, unable to bear the blistering heat of the sand under the bare feet. This was too much even for the robber. जब उसने loincloth ने robber को देखा, who watched it from a distance. The grin actually faded from his face, and he cried, "Hey, come here!" The Brahmin accelerated his pace forward. "I will give you something," said the robber. But the Brahmin replied, "I do not want it." At this, the robber shouted, "Stop!" and ran after the Brahmin, who thought his end had come. When he caught up with the Brahmin, the robber kicked off the sandals he had stolen and said, "Take them back, I don't want them. You don't understand a good turn when it is offered." जब तुम्हारी भलाई की बात करो, तुम्हें ऑफर नहीं कर रहा, तुम सैंडल लेके जाओ. The Brahmin gratefully accepted his footfare. "Now I can reach my village before the evening. You have a compassionate heart, although you like to grunt and behave like a tusked boar. Your compassion is due to the vestige of merit left from your previous incarnation." अब पिछले जन्म के कारण तुम एक दयालु आदमी हो, वैसे तुम बोर की तरह कर रहे हो. How do you know? asked the robber, interested. The Brahmin said, "I know what you were in previous life. I'll tell you all about it if you're interested. But first, find me some shade to rest in." The robber led him to a little grove of wood apple trees where the river wound in and out pleasantly. He climbed a tree and shook the branches until some hard fruit dropped to the ground. He banged the shells on a piece of granite and presented the rind for Brahmin to eat. The Brahmin plunged into the river to cool his body, resting in the shade, ate the fruit, and felt better. The robber watched him with solitude and asked, how is it good? The Brahmin muttered an accent and said, "You were not a ruffian in your previous life, but a man of learning. You had mastered the Vedas and could recite and give an exposition to them. You were a master of grammar, prosody, and scriptures. People looked to you for guidance and enlightenment and brought rewards in the form of grain and gifts at your very door. Your wife was a good and practical woman, a home and a loving wife, honor and riches from a fellow human beings. What more could one desire? Normally nothing. But your nature craved for something more, that is the company of a public woman whom you met one day on the temple steps where a crowd was passing." तो एक तुम एक पब्लिक वुमेन से मिले जो कि एक औरत थी जो कि मिली तुम्हें, राइट, जब टेम्पल को पास कर रहे थे. Your fate ordained that you should pick up a little flower garland that she had left on the stone steps. उसने stone steps में एक जो flower garland छोड़ा था तो आपने उठाया उसको. Others ignored it, knowing it to be a common trick to attract notice, but you picked it up. And that was the beginning of the end of your nobility. You began to spend all your time in her house. You neglected your wife, but the good lady became resigned to it. तुम उसके साथ ही पब्लिक वुमेन के साथ ना रहने लगे, पर तुम्हारी बीवी ने उसे एडजस्ट कर लिया. You treated her graciously. Sometimes you made her cook the food and serve you both and attend on that woman just like a servant. It went on until you became a sick man and also bankrupt. तुम्हें भूखे बीमार व्यक्ति हो गए और bankrupt भी हो गए. You exchanged your wealth for all the disease that a woman of her type would give you, and when this transaction was complete, she had no further use of your company. She threw you out and shut the door on your face. You went back as an ailing bankrupt. People naturally took no notice of you. But it made no difference to your wife. She nursed you, found the money for your food and medicines, and fasted and prayed constantly for your welfare. One day she found a great physician who carried in his bag the rarest herbs from all the mountains. The paste of a certain astringent herbs applied to the inflammations of your body made you groan and swim. When your wife brought a dose of some medicine to your lips, you bit off her little finger in rage. You died with the finger choking your windpipe, thinking not of her but of the prostitute. Still, your wife laid herself on the funeral pyre, cremated herself along with your body. And in the next birth, you are what you are for your sinful and selfish existence. But the first phase of your life, when you were enlightened, has left you with a vestige of compassion. And that is why you could not bear to watch my feet blister on the sand. What next? Asked the robber swiftly. You will be born a hunter who will receive the grace of the 7 sages and become a composer of one of the world's masterpieces, prophesied the Brahmin and went his way. Valmiki's next birth, he said, continuing in his autobiography, was from the womb of Nagakanika, a beauty of nether world of serpents who had enticed a sage in the forest, gone back in the world after giving birth to a baby, leaving it to be attended by a hunter in the forest. तो वो थी एक सुंदर कन्या, उसने सेज को किया, फिर अपने बच्चे को छोड़ करके वो चली गई और फिर एक हंटर ने उस लड़के को पाला. The child grew up, became a full-fledged hunter, always armed with a bow and arrows and seeking a wide variety of targets. In course of time, he married and had children. He came to have a large family to support. This meant that he had to slaughter more creatures each day to feed his dependents. बहुत सारे जानवरों को मारना पड़ता था dependents को feed करने के लिए. Animals and birds became familiar with the footfalls of this terrible slayer and fled at his approach. Gradually, it became difficult for him to secure the necessary amount of food for his dependents at home, and naturally turned to other ways. He held up wayfarers in the forest path, keeping with the habit of his previous incarnation. पिछले जन्म के कारण जो था, वो जो लोग जो आते थे उनको पकड़ लेता था, and snatched for them whatever he could find in them: food, money, clothes, and ornaments. He waited for his prey in the shadows of the forest and attacked them ruthlessly. He became notorious and people remarked, "Oh, there is a bandit, we must be careful." He killed everything he could lay his hands on, chased and attacked whoever passed in the valley, the forest and the mountain. He was wild, reckless, cruel and inconsiderate. In this condition, he waylaid 7 persons who were coming along the forest path one day. He jumped down from the branch of a tree and blocked the path of the 7 sages. 7 ऋषि आ रहे थे तो उनका path block कर दिया. Celestial beings who were visiting the earth. The robber flourished a knife and bow and arrows and cried, "Your life or?" The 7 looked at him indifferently and one of them asked, "You flourish so many weapons and put on all this act just to get what?" "All that you have, there may be 7 of you, but I am equal to you. So do not let your numbers make you foolhardy. I can sting you all together like a brace of birds." "Why all this unpleasant talk?" asked his victims. "You're trying to resist me," he declared. "No," they cried. "We want to give you all that we have and more." This was a new experience for the hunter and he asked why. "Not easily explained, but we want to help you." The hunter became suspicious at this unaccustomed word and asked, "Why?" "You're asking why again," the victim said. "Because you deserve our help, that's all." तुम्हें हमारी मदद की जरूरत है, इसलिए हमारी मदद. And in what way will you help? He asked, growing curious. They just smiled at his question, at which they became suspicious again and declared, if you're trying to lead me away with clever words, you're mistaken. First, hand over. As you see, we are bare handed men, possessing only the clothes that we wear. What do you expect us to give you? I will search your persons, he said aggressively. I generally punish those who come empty handed. The world has no place for such worthless men. He said with a leer, studying their faces closely. You're 7 and maybe hiding something among yourselves. Immediately deliver it, will you? Yes, they said, much to his surprise. The tactics were novel and bewildering, but he tried to cover his confusion with bravado. And he did everything short of attacking them. Somehow he felt checked at that point, but he kept burying them in various ways until they said, it is absolutely imperative that you do what we say if you want us to deliver the goods. What are these goods and where do you have them? We have something precious to give you, but you will have to answer our question. Why are you acquiring such a load of sin, robbing people and causing pain to all the God's creatures? What do you hope to gain thereby? I have 8 children and ninth is coming. I have to find food or the means for them. Also, there are always 1 or 2 guests when we eat. Poor fellow, have you ever thought at what price are you keeping your dependents alive? What do you mean? The life that you now enjoy or suffer as a result of your actions in previous lives. And now you're acquiring more sins every year instead of seeking liberation, at least in a future life. Go home and ask your wife and children if anyone is willing to share the burden with you. Since they are so ready to share your loot, ask them if they are willing to share your sins too. Now go and bring us their answer, and we will give you everything we have. This is a dodge, perhaps, he said. You have a solemn word that we shall await. At the same spot with your return with your reply. They took their seats convincingly on a little rock under a tree. The hunter commanded, don't move, stay there. I will be back. He was gone quite a while and returned, panting with excitement. He found his 7 victims still waiting for him. He came up, stood before them with bowed head. What is their reply? They asked. No one is prepared to accept the share of my burden. I had never thought of it all these days. They will not help me in any way. My children treated my question as a joke and laughed, and my wife, as I said, was getting mad notions in my head. We promised you a precious gift. Do you want it? Yes. Very well then. Here, in the shade of a tree, sit down on the bare ground, shut your eyes and repeat Mara Mara without ever stopping. Hmm? Let this world be like the breath that goes in and out of your nostrils, as natural and constant. Empty your mind of all other thoughts except the sound of the word Mara. What does it mean? You will understand as you repeat. After they left, the bandit flung over his weapons, squatted on a tree, and uttered the word Mar with every breath. Mar, Mar, Mar. Through repetition fused together became Ram, 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 the hero of Ramayana, the very sound of whose the name is said to deepen one's being. Years passed. We cannot normally measure this period of time, which must have been thousands of years according to stories, perhaps long enough for the nature of the country to be changed, for forests to become cities, kingdoms to become deserts, for mountains to change their contours and rivers their courses. From behind a vast moon of earth, one heard constant repeated word, Ram, Ram, sounding like the endless murmur of an ocean. Passers-by heard the unceasing sound, felt baffled, and passed on. In the fullness of time, 7 sages came that way again, and they alone knew where the sound emancipated from. They broke open the crust of earth and the anthill, which had grown over the old hunter who was lost in the trance of muttering the name of Rama. His body had grown emaciated. Long hair covered his head and face, but he sat unmoved until they woke him up. Since he emerged from an anthill, he was known as Valmiki. He was a rishi now, one on whom grace had descended. He was beyond hunger and thirst and the needs of the body. Presently he established his hermitage on the bank of Ganges. At this stage in narration, Valmiki explained to Ram himself, owing to the potency of your name, I became a sage able to view the past, present, and future as one. अब कल पढ़े माँ? ठीक है, कल पढ़े.
अच्छी है.